What's your caught in a NSW situation at work? A few weeks after I started at a new company, they hired a new and very pretty secretary near me. Every dude at the office was getting shot down by her, except some guy on the second floor. The guy was your typical jacked, tan, slick hair sorta guy that can win a woman over with a smile. He won her attention and every day I'd overhear him flirting with her hard over at her desk. Fast forward another couple months to some random workday. I need to go do a supplies run and my boss needed some stuff too. So we take a walk over to the small supply closet. He unlocks the door and we walk in to see the secretary and this tan guy going at it hard. There was a good few seconds of us all making direct eye contact when my boss closes the door and walks away without saying a word. I wasn't sure what to do, so I just sort of go back to my desk. An hour goes by and I still haven't seen my boss or the secretary, and I'm not sure any of my co-workers would believe it if I said anything. All of a sudden my desk phone rings. The lady on the line is with HR and wants me in her office now. I get in there and see the secretary crying in one seat in the entrance area beside my boss, who is pale as a ghost. In an office a few feet away, the tan dude is having a screaming match with the HR woman. When I walk in, a similar moment occurred to the storage closet and everyone froze and locked eyes. HR woman comes out of her office and has the tan dude go into her co-worker's office while she invites me in to talk. All of a sudden, when I'm in the office with the HR lady, she starts breaking down crying. I mean sobbing and snotting everywhere. Unsure what to say, or do I ask if she's okay? She apologizes and then tells me that the tan guy is her husband. I have no idea what to do, so just kept saying it'll be okay over and over. First thing that popped into my head. After a few minutes of her crying, she straightens herself out, has me confirm what my boss said happened, then told me I was good to go back to my desk. A bit later my boss comes to my desk and tells me we're going to lunch. The moment we're in his car, he lets out this huge sigh and blankly says, "I had no idea they were married." Both the husband and secretary were fired and the boss and I chuckled about the incident forever. I believe the HR woman ended up getting remarried and total gossip, so who can tell if it's true? The secretary had given the tan guy herpes. What a ride. At my last job, there was this deaf guy who was nonverbal. The company brought in an ASL translator for every meeting, which was the only time you could really interact with him face to face. Honestly a stand-up guy though. One day I'm in the washroom taking a dump, and I hear something strange in the stall next to me. The steady schlick 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 of someone jerking off, then some grunting. So I finished up quick and left the washroom. It was just me and the masturbator in there. I checked his shoes, then stood outside and pretended to be on the phone. Turns out it was the deaf guy. I just smiled and waved when I saw him. From then on, I noticed that he went to the washroom for a suspiciously long time every day. I guess nobody told him that jacking off makes noise. If you have worked in an office long enough, you learn everyone's shoes through osmosis. That's why it always bewilders me when someone cranks it in a stall when their feet are visible. Hey, Craig, your specifically worn dessert boots don't lie. I used to work in a call center for a major satellite TV provider. Other than the usual perv that would call to be gross, we had one dude who would call and just make us read off the titles of dirty movies. What do y'all have? Backdoor S9, Busty Blondes 2, etc. All the while he would just beat his meat to ladies reading the names of dirty movies. We used to get this too, until we set up the dirty line. The dirty line was specifically for those requests. They would be transferred to Dave. Dave was gruff and Scottish. They didn't stay on the line. Not me, but a past co-worker. We'll call him Bob Smith. He had logged into a shared computer in our lab one day, and he pulled up Outlook, and then turned around to do something with his phone while Outlook loaded. Well, let me tell you, our corporate mail filter failed that day. I walk in to see Bob turned away from the screen, and on the screen, in the Outlook preview pane, nearly full screened, was an email, in huge letters, "Bob Smith, are you getting enough big black dong?" And of course, this lovely email was accompanied by a picture showing exactly what they were talking about. Just in case you were unsure, I try to suppress a laugh, and just say to him, "Well, Bob, are you?" He looked at me. "Am I what? What are you talking about?" I point to the screen. He can't hit that delete button fast enough. The words "well, are you?" with no further context for anyone else overhearing, became a running joke between us. Towards the end of my shifts I have to clean the bathrooms. I knock on the women's room and ask if anyone is in there. With no response I walk in to clean. I find one of my women co-workers flicking her bean in the handicap stall. It was awkward but she didn't stop. She left the job shortly after. If you stop, you are the one getting caught. If you keep going, they're the one who's watching. My old married, wife and kids, boss had a ton of nudes on the work computer of mostly other women and occasionally himself. They were labeled mundane things like Maloney job site. Somehow he synced his personal email to the work one and I discovered he was picking up men on Craigslist. Email subject lines like "suck my dong daddy" are hard to ignore. Only got caught peripherally in this one. One of my IT guys assigned to one of our regional offices kept getting help requests from one clerical, and most of the problems were questionable at best. She obviously just wanted to see him. One day he gets a call and goes up to her cubicle and she's standing there with her pants off. He backed out of that, put her on his do not respond list until things could get straightened out, and then called me for help since nothing he had done was working. Since she wasn't my employee, I picked up the phone and called the regional director. The initial contact was something like, "Hi, regional, first name basis. You know, I've always supported casual Fridays, but don't you think no pants Fridays are a little too much?" Freaking autocomplete on my Chrome search bar. Opened a left tab instead of expensescompanyname.com. Alt plus tab as if nothing happened. That night I shift plus delete all autocomplete, even the legit ones. Telling my friend's story, with her permission of course. My friend had a big interview this day. She studied nutrition in college and was interviewing with a hospital in Boston to work on their dietetics team. She went to the interview and met with the hospital worker, sat down and chatted for a bit. It was going well, so the interviewer asked if she wanted a tour of the area of the hospital she would be working in. She agreed, and the hospital was beautiful, but the interviewer seemed a bit awkward during the tour. She figured this was their way of politely ending the interview when they weren't interested, and tried to brush the awkwardness off and compensate by being more energetic, which only seemed to make the interviewer even more awkward. Finally, at the end of the tour when she was leaving, the interviewer admitted that she had a lovely sweater, but there was a lacy, black thong stuck to her back from static. She had been parading around the hospital trying to talk herself up, all the while walking around with the thong displayed for all to see. Needless to say, she didn't end up working there, and to this day jokes about how if she's ever dying and we need to send her to a hospital, she'd rather die than be admitted there. I caught a couple of married co-workers going out in the parking lot. They're married, just not to each other. Not me, but a close friend. He worked as a vet tech, cleaning kennels, walking the dogs, changing bandages, etc. He was good friends with the boss lady and she would bring her shepherd mix pups to stay in the kennels some weekends, especially if she was out of town or busy. One Sunday morning he ran up to take care of the animals and the pups were there. They love to play, so, after cleaning and caring for the other animals, he went into their run and was tossing the ball and roughhousing with these two dogs. One dog jumped on him from behind and its paw slid into his front pocket, pulling down his pants. Right at this moment, with his pants around his ankles, one dog in front waiting and the other behind him, he realized that maybe today was not the day to go commando, especially as his boss walks in at that precise moment to see him, with her beloved puppas, hanging out in all his glory. He called me when he got home laughing and crying. His boss simply took the dogs and walked out without saying a word. Fortunately, it wasn't a rom-com movie, so he was able to explain the next day. Her only comment was, "Let's remember to wear underwear from now on, okay?" I worked for a call center a couple years ago and when we asked someone their name we had to say, "And who do I have the pleasure of speaking with today?" Well, for some freaking reason why, I have no idea. I asked the lady on the phone, "And who do I have the pleasure of sleeping with today?" The girl who sits next to me looked at me wide-eyed and then I realized what I said and apologized profusely. The lady on the phone just started cracking up and then told me her name was Marianne. To answer the important question, I am sorry to say I did not sleep with Marianne. A co-worker brought in a VR headset with pee on it, so even though I am a woman and can't get my dong sucked, I got my virtual dong sucked at work. The wonders of modern technology. I was chilling at my grandpa's work between school and swimming lessons, mainly to eat at the cafeteria. He worked in the government of my crappy country and had an old computer in his office, but him being old he wasn't using it much. So me being a 12-year frisky pervert and having access to internet for the first time in my life found out about internet P. I only watched it, but nonetheless there was a lot of disturbing P traffic coming in through my grandpa's PC. This went on for months until my grandpa got in trouble for using a government computer for P. I wasn't allowed to come to his work after that. I was a janitor in college dorms. I worked with this 160-something dude with bad legs. One day my supervisor walked in on him pants down jacking it in the janitor closet. The way he tells it, they both locked eyes. Then he just turned around and left. Yup, that's usually how I handle it too. This one doubles as an excellent no, it really isn't what it looks like. Doing field work in Oklahoma, aka the deer tick capital of the world. Had been picking the little bastards off me all day and had already had Rocky Mountain spotted fever once that summer. None of my other female crewmates were home when I got there, so I grabbed the lone male crewmate and asked him to check my back for ticks. Turns out his girlfriend was coming down to visit that weekend, and she got in a little early and walked in to see me, bent over a table with the back of my shirt pulled up and my bra unclasped, and her boyfriend's nose about an inch from my back. Cue 2 sets of horrified deer in headlights expressions. I told that story at their wedding a couple weeks ago, so I don't think I screwed anything up too badly. I work nights in the reception at a small hotel. Once this older guy came down with his laptop and requested help because he couldn't make his P work. So I had to update the guy's Flash player to make his Filipino P work. It was a bit awkward, but I'm not gonna deny some old guy his P. So I fixed his computer and the dude was happy. Used to work in a combination cafe bar restaurant. Came in at 6 AM to open up the cafe portion of the business to discover the bar is a total mess. Empty wine bottles and broken glasses everywhere. All the beer taps sticky. A 3/4 empty bottle of tequila, which we have never sold, sitting on the side, etc. Go into the office to drop off my bag and find our head chef asleep in his underwear. Wake him up and he mutters something about not meaning to stay so late and bolts out of the place. Thoroughly confused and anticipating backlash from head office if I don't work out what the frick is going on, I decide to check the cameras and see married, head chef and also married, but not to each other, restaurant manager getting wasted, trashing the place, and fricking at about 2 AM the previous night. For a while I was sort of dating our secretary. One day after work, after everyone had gone home, she came into my office and we ended up having a great time on my desk. About halfway through I picked her up and pushed her against the glazed glass wall of my office while she was straddling me. After I got tired, she turned around facing the glass and we continued until I finished. I had forgotten about the security cameras in the hallways and entrance. About 3 days later I get to work and there is a DVD plus R on my desk, with a note, "Hope you had fun," and it was of the camera that points almost directly at my office because it is on a corner. You could see a lot more than I thought you could through those glazed windows. Security guys are either blackmailing me or a bro. This happened just last week. I was trying to find a stock image to use on our newest company blog post. I found one on Google Images, followed it to the original site and clicked the download button for the high-res version. Next thing I know, I'm on the browser site with 3 other new windows open on my desktop to other P sites. I froze in horror. Lucky for me, my sound was off and I'm in my own office with my screens facing away from the door. The image site looked so harmless. And now I know we have no restrictions on our internet at all. I was at work. We were closed, and I was the only one still there. We close at 2 PM, and sometimes delivery guys forget and still show up to drop off packages. I had just gone to the bathroom and put a small vibe in my panties, walked out, and the doorbell rang. Without thinking, I went to the front and opened the door. I kind of froze when the delivery guy walked in and started toward the back where they usually leave the packages, because I'm standing there and you can hear the buzzing. I had to follow him so that I could sign for the package once he dropped it off. I'm not sure if he heard it buzzing, but it was super quiet in there with no one around, so I'm fairly certain he did. What makes this worse is that I'm the regional director, so if he mentioned it to anyone else the next time he delivered, he would be mentioning it to my direct reports. No one ever said anything to me about it. Another time, I was texting my boyfriend and one of my employees at the same time. I messaged my BF telling him I really need some dong. A couple of hours later, he hadn't responded to that particular message. So I looked at my messages to be sure I sent it, and noticed it wasn't in my message history with him. Sudden realization hits, so I checked my texts with my employee, and sure as crap, I had sent it to her. I immediately sent her an apology message, and she responded back saying that she and her wife were at Kohl's when she got the message and that she busted out laughing and decided not to respond, but to let me figure it out on my own that I had fricked up. Good thing she's a lesbian and not a male employee, or that could have been very bad. A little over a decade ago, I was working as a quality assurance tester at Sony. Rather than slogging my way through unfinished video games, though, I was tasked with watching movies that had been released on Blu-ray, making sure that all of their various features functioned as expected when accessed on the PlayStation 3. While that might sound like an amazing job, it was actually less enjoyable than you'd think, both because I didn't get to choose what I watched, and because I'd have to endure repeated viewings for every subtitle track, alternate cut, and ill-conceived piece of commentary that was included on the discs. One day, I was assigned the movie Eyes Wide Shut. If you're unfamiliar with the film, here's what you need to know. Stanley Kubrick was, and still is, famed as being one of the most driven and detail-oriented directors to grace the silver screen. If anyone else had made Eyes Wide Shut, though, critics likely would have decried it as a filmmaker's excuse to surround themselves with dozens of naked women. There's a scene, for example, that's literally just Tom Cruise walking through a graphic orgy. Each person involved is wearing a mask, but nothing else. Anyway, as with any of the films that I was assigned, I had to watch this one a half dozen times, at the very least, and given that my desk wasn't the most private of locations, my screen was completely visible to anyone who might happen to pass by. Word quickly got around that I was watching P, which prompted my supervisor to approach me from behind. "Max, what are you doing?" he asked. I kept my eyes glued to the screen, but held up the movie's case. "It's Eyes Wide Shut. Oh." He stood there for a little while, staring, until the manager walked over. "What are you guys watching?" "Eyes Wide Shut," we both said. "Oh." Over the course of about 10 minutes, my desk was slowly surrounded by the entire management team, up to and including the department head. When the orgy scene finally finished, they all glanced around at each other, chuckled, then hurried off to focus on whatever work they had been neglecting. It was something of a relief for me, and not, as you might be thinking, because I didn't like having my superiors crowd around me, but because I had been seated with my head at crotch level for the entire showing. Like I said, I kept my eyes glued to the screen. I was hooking up with my girlfriend on and around my desk, on a Sunday, office closed, and I hear the front door, which is about 20 meters around the corner from my desk, start unlocking. We both freak out. She grabs my shirt and puts it on and hides under my desk to change, leaving me to walk up to the front door shirtless while my boss walked in, and I explained to him that I needed a second. He waited at the front door for about 2 minutes with the biggest crap-eating grin on his face, trying not to burst out laughing as my GF came around the corner fully dressed and had me introduce her to my boss. He teased me about it for a bit, but I think he found it hilarious. Never told him I fricked her on his desk, but I'll always know that there were butt cheeks on his keyboard. This happened to me yesterday. I was at a BBQ with some co-workers and friends, and we were all tossing a football around on the grass. Ball comes to me, I go for a slight dive, and then I hear this savage rip throughout my shorts. Everything ripped, and all my junk fell out in front of everyone. One homie was a team player and gave me his sweater to use as a kilt for the rest of the day. This happened about 10 to 12 years ago at this small, 60 people, company I work for. A typical accidental reply all instead of a forward. This lady replied all to something with a joke that the punchline was a picture of this girl pulling her shirt up. So I'm sitting there, open the email, then 2 seconds later hear her screaming, "Oh god, no. No. It was hilarious. We're both still there, but I suppose she got a firm talking to at the time. I'm a photographer. I was doing a photo shoot for a beauty clinic and the service I was shooting was an orange skin reduction in the upper thighs. So the model comes out of the changing room with a robe from the clinic, and when we were discussing the shoot and giving directions she dropped the robe on purpose and was completely naked and cool with it. She starts asking me directions completely naked and moving around the space. This was a fit girl with an awesome body and I genuinely felt like I was in pee. I was working late one night with my back then girlfriend, now wife. We were alone and she moved her laptop to work next to me in my office. Glorified title for a slightly bigger desk facing the other desks of the team, so it was an open office with no walls. Long story short, we ended up freaking over my desk, pushing papers out of the way for dramatic effect, and everything went fine. Except that a few days later my boss very casually tells me, I installed security cameras. Just be careful when working late. Since my ex-boss was a pervert with a pee addiction, I'm sure he saved our tape. Got busted hooking up with a server in the wine liquor storage room on the opening night of a new bar in town. I was working there only that night to ensure the bar ran smoothly. When I was done I sat down next to a nice server. She and I talked about our jobs in the past and what would come of this place. We agreed that there'd be a lot of banging be done by the staff and we started sharing our stories of hooking up at work with people from work. At one point I mentioned who'd be the first people to hook up in this place. She suggested it could be us. So we decided it should be us. We thought the liquor storage room would be the best place because it's in the staff area. You need a code to get into the staff area and another to access the booze room. So not many people would be able to enter and we'd hear them coming. Or so we thought. One of the night managers enters, sees us, says, "I'm just here for vodka. Please don't knock over the shelves," and she left. All in all, a pretty cool experience. We had some beers after and had a laugh about our accomplishment. A customer accidentally opened a pee video in a restaurant that I was working in after her friend linked it to her. She left her phone on max volume and when the FUB community theme played, I had a really hard time controlling my laughter. Better the community theme than just the video. I used to fix cell phones. The worst is when somebody wanted you to see their nudes. They would accidentally open gallery when handing it to me. Lot of less scrupulous techs would look through the gallery for nudes when it was a hot chick. I could get that crap for free online and I didn't want to risk peeing off a customer. I didn't get paid enough for that crap. So I avoided that, but when you were doing data transfers sometimes you couldn't get around seeing it. We also had a dude come in periodically with little crap clogging up his phone. One of those Kyocera waterproof flip phones. He was a local playwright and I found out later a friend of my grandpa. Pretty sure he was shoving it up his butt. I don't know how else you routinely get crap embedded into your keypad. Boob sweat damaged phones. Women would come in the summer, pull their phone straight from their cleavage and hand it over. We would open it up and there would be rancid boob sweat inside. A clear brownish yellow fluid. It smelled freaking terrible. Still not as bad as horse pee girl though. We went through a lot of hand sanitizer. A little bit of backstory on this one. I have a pee album on my phone. I'm not obsessed with it or anything, but sometimes the Wi-Fi goes out and I still wanna get my nut off. The cover image for the album is a completely blank screen and the title is pee. Seriously, dude, don't click on this. I figured that title and the lack of a cover image would be enough to sate the curiosity of anyone snooping on my phone so they wouldn't click on it. So I was showing a coworker some pictures of a sunrise or something else cool I saw that morning and he takes my phone to scroll through them. Then, when he gets to the end of them, he exits the album and starts looking at my other photos. At this point, I'm getting pretty nervous, but basically freeze up and don't know what to even say. I try to ask him to give me my phone back, but I can't even manage to choke out any words anymore. He looks through a couple of albums of relatively innocent stuff before seeing my good old pee album. I'm embarrassed at this point, but I figure he'll just awkwardly give me back my phone and we'll pretend this never happened. Right? Wrong? I don't know the logic behind this, but he clicks on it, and in the split second before it loaded, his face had the look of, oh god, I just majorly fricked up all over it. Right as he clicks, I managed to say wait Don before he sees around 10 or 15 images that I don't want to describe in detail. I snatched my phone from him and nervously said sorry and took a bathroom break to catch my breath and get away from him. When I got back, He looked at me differently, but he didn't say anything about it and we pretended it never happened. People that just scroll through all your photos after you try to just show them one are freaking monsters. Worked at an amusement park during high school and was dating a fellow employee. Everyone dated everyone there. We would usually hook up in my car after work at a secluded spot about 15 minutes away. However, she had to be home in a timely manner one night, so we didn't have time to go to the spot. Thus my high school frisky self decided that we would probably be fine pulling in behind a shed next to the parking lot of amusement park. It turns out that it wasn't fine. Mid-bone there was a knock on the window followed by a long pause as I feared the worst. Then the amusement park security guard then asked me to open the door, to which I said, "Can I please put pants on first?" He chuckled as he said yes. Then we were put in the back of his car and driven back to the security office where they called both of our parents. We were minors. We were placed in separate rooms with no doors. Mine was the first room in the hallway. Her parents arrived first. I had never met her parents, and they had to walk past my room in order to get to her room. As her father passed by the door, I received a stare of death more intense than I could ever imagine. During the next 15 minutes as I awaited the arrival of my parents, I contemplated if I was going to be murdered by my own family or if her dad was going to get me first. My mom finally arrives, and I am allowed to leave the security office. I think that I am going to be in serious trouble and have a calm before the storm feeling in my gut. The first thing my mom says to me is, "Yeah, I kind of guessed things were getting hot and heavy when I saw all those hickeys on your neck." On the drive home, I am wondering if she's just leaving the butt blasting to my dad. When I get home, Dad is already asleep, so I just go to bed. Next day, I am in my room and awaken to my dad knocking on the door. I think to myself, here it is. I'm fricked. He comes in and says, "Here, I think you could use this," and hands me a box of condoms and a book titled The Joy of Sex by Dr. Alex Comfort. He then leaves the room, and nothing else was ever said about it. I was blown away, but I was still sure that I would be fired from my job after doing this. Regardless, I went into work the next day. There's a gate outside the amusement park where you scan in. If you are fired, your badge won't work and they will send someone out to get you and officially fire you. To my complete astonishment, badge swipes right away and I just go to work like it's another day. Every day following I always get nervous as they swipe my badge, but it worked every time. I guess they were just that desperate for employees. I never saw or talked to the girl again though. That was probably a weekly occurrence. They can't fire you or they'd have no one. I was working a construction job a long time ago and I was watching this beautiful woman who was walking down the street. Gorgeous legs, a short skirt and a low-cut blouse. I couldn't stop staring, but I probably should have, because I wasn't paying attention and I got slammed in the head by a 2x4 that was leaning against something and fell down. I was wearing my hard hat thankfully, but I was dazed for a moment and had to sit down. It was then that I learned to appreciate work safety. At least you can remember the good part. I work in IT, and have for quite a while. Fairly frequently people will ask if I can recover data from old failed hard drives. I used to do data recovery, and generally it's a pretty task easy to get their stuff back. Anytime anyone asks me to recover, I always make sure to let them know I'll see everything that's on that drive. Me, just so you're aware, I'll see anything that's in this hard drive. Them, yeah, okay. Me, anything. Them, got it. Me, making eye contact every single thing. You can usually see the wheels turning at that point, trying to weigh out how important the pictures of their kids are compared to me seeing what kind of pee they're into, or their own homemade albums. Generally doesn't stop them though. I've recovered the HR lady's honeymoon frick video and pics. A business owner lost a bunch of accounting stuff in a drive and I found his office manager's, his daughter personal nudes folder. That was an awkward discussion when he got those files back. A girl in my office gave me an external drive to recover, then specifically told me to look for her nudes folder and encouraged me to browse it and to let her know my thoughts, which I did. She's actually a quite talented boudoir photographer. Basically, half of my office, I've either seen them nude or know what kind of kinky crap they're into. When I recover their data, it all goes on an external for them to keep and sort through. All of it, every bit. I never say a word about it. I just act like it wasn't there. Occasionally someone will ask if I saw anything weird or anything that stood out. I always reply with nope. Pretty standard stuff. In 14 years I've had one person with 0p on a recovered drive. Absolutely zero. I've never been so proud, impressed and confused in my life. Used to be a lifeguard and decided to take a break to walk the dog in the bathroom. Only had some family bathrooms, not really any men or women designated areas. So I sit down and whip out the old mobile device and start yanking the chain, when all of a sudden the door begins to open up and a younger dad who doesn't know how to knock, my fault I didn't lock it, decides that he is gonna walk right in. He then looks at me as I've got my dong in one hand and my phone in the other and turns to his wife, who couldn't see me, and says, "Let's not use this one. It's pretty dirty." He backed out and closed the door. I have never felt so relieved but so traumatized and a little mad. Mostly because he called me dirty lol. This was this Christmas gone. I work at a cinema. Went into an auditorium to clean after a film had just finished. There was a couple, mid-teens, in the top right well after the credits had finished. I could just see the girl's head bobbing up and down over the dude's crotch. For some reason they hadn't thought maybe to stop at the sound of the doors opening or the cleaning lights coming on. The guy made eye contact with me and immediately nudged the girl to stop. I did a 180 to avoid any more awkward BJ eye contact. They followed shortly after and left, red-faced the whole time. To top it off, this had been a kid's film, The Grinch. Well, something grew 3 sizes that day. I accidentally left a DVD in my laptop of a movie with a very specific erotic theme. Not exactly P, but only people with that specific interest would know about it or recognize it because there was no cover art and the title isn't erotic. So given that, when I brought my laptop to work and realized I left it inside, I just put it halfway through the stack of CDs on my desk with intention to take it home later. I forgot. Flash forward a week. I come into work and the DVD is at the top of the stack. I was mortified but slightly excited because whoever did it recognized the movie and clearly left it there for me to see. I put it back in the middle of the stack. The next day it was back at the top. This went on for days until I finally brought it home because I came to my senses and realized it was super risky. During this whole time, I was snooping around the office trying to find out who it was. I had a huge crush on one of my co-workers and there was certainly chemistry between us, but he was in a relationship. Hoped it was him but never figured out any useful intel. Flash forward again 6 months or so. Co-worker is no longer in a relationship. We start dating. I find out he was the one putting the movie on the top of the stack. Flash forward 8 years to today. We are about to celebrate our 5-year wedding anniversary. The fricking is still great. I worked at a small zoo rescue in New York. We didn't have a lot of large exotic animals, but we were AskReddit, so there is that. I was working on a cloudy day going around doing this and that and it began to rain. We had a large area where the marmosets would hang out outside, with a small tunnel that they could use to get back inside to their interior habitat. Generally when it rained we would keep them inside, but I always let them take themselves inside when it rained because they always wouldn't, because they could be a pain to wrangle inside and get the tunnel door shut so that they couldn't go back out. Anyway, I was the only main keeper on duty besides some volunteers, so I had gone around and helped out some of the other animals and got them set up for the rain. But as I passed the marmoset habitat they were still outside and I swear they were giving me this really funny look, like something odd was up in their world. They also kept moving like they were about to head inside but then would lean the other way and stay on their branch. Honestly, I figured that someone had shut their interior door already and shut them out. It would have been a kind of an odd mistake because when the marmosets were inside, where you could shut the door from, it was pretty obvious. But it was all I could think of because the marmosets themselves were pretty predictable with things like weather. So I circled around inside and immediately was confronted with my issue. 2 volunteers were fricking in the interior cage. They weren't just messing around. It was full on intercourse. Hands up on monkey bars and I think a foot on the cage. Who knows? It was a mess. The tunnel between the indoor and outdoor exhibits wasn't even shut. The marmosets just apparently wanted nothing to do with that. I don't blame them. Thinking back to the marmosets' faces when I asked them what was up, I like to assume that I had a similar look on my face when confronted with the problem inside. To anyone concerned, the little guys weren't too wet and I got them in quickly after that. They also got some sweet pineapple and an enrichment box that they could play with to help them move past their earlier dilemma. Woman, 55, comes into restaurant bar and orders multiple drinks of Patron and Grey Goose on the rocks. Regular customer, 65M, starts talking to her. Third person, 65M, comes into restaurant and sits on opposite side of woman. First man and woman head towards restrooms and disappear for a minute. Bus boy tells me there are two people in the handicapped stall. Go in and they are naked from the bottom down laying on the floor of the stall banging. I start banging on the door and tell them to stop. He asks me to hold on a minute. Third guy comes in and looks under the stall and starts to crawl under. I grab him and say WTF. He says that's my wife. People suck. I used to be a bouncer at a bar in college. One night I was stationed outside the washroom, beside the stage, overlooking the dance floor. One girl was visiting the washroom far too frequently and started grazing up against me. So I took the hint and we started talking. After she made it clear she wanted to get fricked right there, and realizing I wasn't going to be off work for a few hours, I took her to the basement where the manager's office is and we have a small lounge with couches for after hours activities. However, one of the bus boys noticed us on the couch without recognizing me and told the owner two drunk people were hooking up in the basement. He comes downstairs and yells before entering the room, which scared me into leaping up. He entered to see my fully erect dong swinging like a door stopper spring and shielded his eyes like he had accidentally stared at the sun. We still laugh about it to this day. Loose definition of work, but I jacked off in a church bathroom and got caught as a preteen. That made for an awkward confessional. I was an altar boy. Without really noticing it, I always expose my entire butt while using a urinal. My boss confronted me about it one day. He thought I was changing outfits, and now I have to use a toilet stall. Worked at a third-party call center, which in itself has enough stories to fill this thread, but this story is mine. I met my current so there about 5 years ago. We spent a few months flirting and getting to know each other through company Skype and email and finally hooked up one night at her place. At this point in our lives neither of us had a car, so our mobility was limited. Anyway, it was the day after we hooked up for the first time and we were pretty eager to get back at it. After our shift ended we were going to wait for a bus home when she dragged me down an alleyway next to our office building and to the underground parking garage. So after a few minutes of her riding me we hear "excuse me" and see a security guard watching us. He proceeded to watch us while she dismounted me and we got proper again. He had us follow him to the security office, scolding us the whole way, which of course we deserved. We were absolutely mortified and ashamed that we let our hormones get the better of us. We told him which company in the building we were employees of and gave him our info. He told us he would think about not telling anyone since we were so respectful and let us go. Sure enough, the next day we both get called to HR separately and both had pretty much the same convo. HR asked us why we didn't just use our vehicle or drive home, and we explained our situation and acknowledged how dumb we were. Anyway, in the end HR told us since it was not on company time or company property, parking garage was for the building the call center was in but not the call center itself. There would be no disciplinary action and it would not be factored into our future in the company and no one would be told. Well, of course everyone found out and I kept getting nods of nice from co-workers, but that was the most that came from it. I wouldn't take it back, but I would not repeat, lol. When I coached soccer at the high school I teach at, I used to have to change in whatever free room I could find. We had no facilities to ourselves, 6 schools in one building, and the actual practice facilities were 2 miles away by bus and out in the open. So I had to change in my classroom or a colleague's free classroom. The bathroom was never an option. It's a mess and I can't lock the door. I need to be able to lock the door, obviously. I lock the door every time, and rarely had any interruptions. Until testing week. Teachers also look for open rooms in which to conduct testing. I found an available room to change, and about 30 seconds into changing, with my pants coming off and me very much in a bad look, I hear "oh look, we'll go in here" from the voice of a colleague. I hear the key enter the tumbler, and without thinking too much I bellow "Noop" as loudly as I can. I'm a tall man with a deep voice. My colleague paused, and I heard "Let's try another room," student name, and footsteps away from me. That was the closest call ever. Was a store manager for a mess stop in my early 20s in VA. There was this trashy, but passable New Jersey woman with the accent and all who was incredibly incompetent, but managed to fail upwards repeatedly until she was a store manager at a large store. One day, she got fired out of nowhere along with her assistant manager and a store manager who was there to help her with an upcoming inventory because the store had shrink issues. It was weird because they all got fired before the inventory, and the other store manager was not even from the area. So, I asked my DM about it. They reviewed the security footage and one night she sucked them both off before they double teamed her in the back of the store in the middle of prepping for inventory later that week. 21-year-old me really wanted to see that footage. One job pretty early on in my career. I worked at an online ad agency in Philly, in the very early days of online advertising, late 90s, and one of our clients was, to give it its proper name, Richards Sporting Goods. Now, it was a known fact around the account team for Richards that whenever we had to search the client's term online for anything, we had to be super specific and specify Richards Sporting Goods, because it was still the early days of the internet, so search engines weren't quite as sophisticated as using Google is now with default safe controls and filtered results and all. No, it was still kind of like the Wild West then. So all sorts of in case you don't get where I'm going here. Back then, if you put just Richards into Alta Vista or Ask Jeeves or Yahoo or even early Google, the image search results were just a wall of dongs. So anyway, all of us knew from experience what search terms to use. All of us, that is, except the new girl to the team, who was fresh out of school, and super naive, and just ever so slightly annoying. No, she was not aware of this universal rule of thumb yet. So one day when she was putting together some slides for some presentation, and asked where she could find an image of the client's logo to put on one of the slides, my shouted response to her over the walls of our cubicles was, "Search for it online. Just search Richards. It's the first result." And 10 seconds goes by until we all heard her scream "Oh my god" in disgust, which was met by all of us bursting into laughter. All of us. That was, except my boss, who did not appreciate my attempt at levity at the new girl's expense, and had a sit-down discussion with me about it. Still totally worth it, though. I had that job for 3 years, but I'll have that story for the rest of my life. You have been visited by the Sourced Chihuahua. You will be blessed with good pasta, but only if you comment "Simmer well, Papa, Simmer well, Papa." Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.